Continue the conversation about Andoni Iraola as we take a look at his managerial career, and it looking like it's Liverpool next for the Spanish manager. Frank Leboeuf joining us now, and Don Hutchison as well. Don, this is the first time that we are seeing you since this Iraola news to Liverpool and moving on. What do you make of it?
I think it's positive. I think if you're a fan of any club in the Premier League or anywhere around the world, and especially Liverpool, you want to have a coach that you can latch onto. I think Slot in the end done a very good job. When you look at his 2 years in charge, a 5th position, Champions League and winning the title, I think he's done a terrific job. Having said that, watching Liverpool this season has been hard. I think there's been mitigating circumstances with, we talked about Diogo Jota and the quality of players that were sold. But in terms of, I think Iraola coming in, I've watched his Bournemouth side and they're a front-footed side. They're very much like a Jurgen Klopp side where he tells his players, you know, look forward first, try and think about scoring at the earliest opportunity. You need to run hard, you need to be fit, there's no days off. And that's what I think if you're a fan of your football club and you watch your team, and especially Liverpool off the back of Jurgen Klopp a couple of years ago, if you're a Liverpool fan and you see your team run as hard as they can, because they got outrun, Kay, I think it was 34 times or something last season. You want to see your team work hard, run as hard as you can. They've got enough skillful players, but at least you can latch on to the footballers and the coach being 100%ers. So for Liverpool, it feels like a really good fit.
OK, we were talking yesterday, Don, with the panel here about the positions that he'll need to reinforce for next season. Which are the areas of concern for you?
Well, centre-back, Konate's leaving. I think that's a must. I think a holding midfield player. I mean, there's talk of Gakpo putting a transfer request in today, if that's true. So you can't rely on Ngamoa, who's a teenager. It needs a bit of surgery. It needs squad investment. It needs players. And normally I'm on here, Kane, I normally say like squad depth, and that means players on the bench. I think Liverpool now need reinforcements in their starting 11. And they need a bit of muscle. They need to find a bit of muscle, because Liverpool last year, watching them, and Stevie would agree, you know, watching Liverpool last year, they were weak. They had nothing about them in midfield. There was no one who put a foot in. There was no spite. They were easy to play against. So I think when you look at positions, it might be a right winger, obviously because Salah's gone. So Diamande's the big link. A holding midfield player with muscle, and a centre back.
Right back. Unfortunately, Frimpong's never a right back in a month of Sundays. I suppose Kerkez might get another opportunity to go again. But if it's becoming obvious early on, it's still not changing. They'll have to think about that. Probably will have to wait to Christmas, unless they do something in the summer. So there's quite a few positions that they're going to have to beef up on, and that means spending a few quid again. So whether FSG have that money and whether they have it within PSR to do that, I don't know. I suppose selling a few players. I suppose they have to sell a couple of players at least.
But they can't. They have to have the money, because they can't afford. They cannot afford to sell players. They're at bare bones right now as it is. So they 100%. Can't be thinking along the lines of, well, if we can sell a couple of players to get some in. They have to be signing players, and then once they figure out what they've got, right, can we do something and maybe bring some money in? Because they've got bare bones, they've got no squad. Liverpool doesn't have a squad as we speak.
It was quite clear as the season went on that just going to the sort of new manager, that Liverpool did not fancy, for whatever reason, Xabi Alonso. Because they wouldn't have let him go to Chelsea. So they obviously had their reservations and they wanted to go somewhere else. Now, in the end, it looked like they were going to stay with Arne Slot. But if you put the pieces together of the jigsaw with Richard Hughes, who's sporting director or whatever he is, Richard Hughes was sporting director at Bournemouth when he hired Andoni Iraola. So you've got to feel this has been in the workings in the background for quite a while, whilst they've, and obviously Iraola announced a fair wee while ago that he was going to be leaving at the end of the season. And listen, I think everybody was okay with that, because he's moving on to bigger and better things, whether it was back in Spain or staying in England. But you just have to feel, with all the sort of gremlins in the head of Liverpool about Arne Slot, I think they wanted to give him every chance. to succeed. But as it got to the end of the season, it became almost impossible. Yep. And then the Iraola announcement, which I'm sure we're going to have, anytime soon, is actually quite a sensible one. Now, I heard Stevie talking the other day. He's a great manager. He's got a great CV at these smaller clubs. But it is just a completely different dynamic walking into Liverpool Football Club and having to go head-to-head with Arsenal, City and all the rest of them while fighting all the fights on the European side as well. But I'm sure he's ready, but it's just a huge task, but a great opportunity for him. And I do think he'll get it probably in the next few days.
Frank, what's your reaction, Iraola to Liverpool?
Well, I think it's good news for the Reds because I was very surprised to not see Xabi Alonso going to his former club as a player, now as a coach. But I think it's a very good news. Iraola is a great coach. He knows, and I'm pretty sure he knows how to make sure that Liverpool is going to go back to their best. Now we have to see how he can handle, the fact that he hasn't got Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold like they used to have as fullbacks, and it's only Kerkez and Frimpong. And how it's going to work, not sure it's going to work. How it's going to work with Ekitike when he's going to come back, because he can have an issue with that if Ekitike comes back and only plays few games because Isaac is at front and he's a big star with the big money, and Ekitike might want to leave if he doesn't have a time of playing. So he will have to sort out something, and I agree with Don. I think they need more muscle. I think in the middle of the park they're not strong enough in that matter. The way they used to be, it was stronger, it was more defensive, it was more hard work. So Iraola will have to work almost on everything, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be, hopefully he's going to be successful.
But it's the same players, isn't it? It's Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai, players that won the Premier League and were fantastic, certainly for the first 7 months of that season when they did all the dirty work. Didn't finish the season as strongly, but they were brilliant at the start of the season. But Szoboszlai apart, the other two lost form big time. Now, McAllister had some injuries, but they lost form. The question is, obviously Szoboszlai doesn't want to get shifted from pillar to post again, having to fill in all these different roles. But the other question is, can McAllister and Gravenberch get back to that form of, what would I say, when is it, a year ago or whatever it was? If they get back to that, they've got the makings of a good midfield. But then that begs the question, what do you do with a little German superstar? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Where does this team finish next season if it's as it is right now? They finish fifth this season.
They're not getting the Champions League.
It depends how that midfield plays. That midfield, on paper, Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai was the best midfield in England the season before.
For 6 months.
For 6 months, right? And then Slot started making some changes. They went out of the FA Cup, they lost the Carabao Cup, they're out of the Champions League. But for 6 months or 7 months, it was the best midfield in England. So there's no reason that can't happen again.
I think in hindsight, I firmly believe that Arne Slot let the players rest on their laurels and could not recover from it. Because for 6 months, you just said it, there's no question. We were talking about those three being the best in Europe. We were. Above PSG as well. And then they win the league early, and then they fall off a cliff. And I think it's dead easy now to look back. But if you look back, he's let them rest on the laurels, and they've never got it back. And unfortunately, that first season, there was no injuries, no problems with form. No, there was no problems. There was not a problem the whole year. All of a sudden, they start picking up some bad injuries, things go against them. Then you've got Richard Hughes and his other teammates upstairs who give Arne Slot a small squad. And so the fact that Don's talking about 34 teams outran Liverpool, Arne Slot was talking in the middle of the season about how I've got to keep throwing the same guys out. I've got to keep chucking out the same 11. And so that means that in training, you can't train properly. So there's no question they need it's a broom. Somebody needs to come in with a broom. And the fact that they've changed the manager is, number one, the greatest thing they've done. Because that fresh-faced, fresh ideas will everybody's ears will prick up. But they've got to add players. They need players. And Richard Hughes, it's great that Richard Hughes and Iraola have worked together, and so he'll have a good idea of the people that'll suit Iraola. But they need to get doing it now. They need to start working now, and they need to start building that squad up so that physically, in particular, you know, Frank was talking about it. Everybody walked through Liverpool last season. It was unbelievable the way they walked through. Nobody up front was closing the ball properly. That means the middle can't close the ball, and then the back four fell apart. The whole thing needs a brush, and Iraola is the first piece of it. But they need players in, and they need starters in.
And he's got to make some big, bold calls, because
Yes.
I think if you, and maybe we'll see some coming out in the Dutch press down the line 6 months. But I bet if you were to ask Arne Slot in 6 months or a year's time, who's fallen on his sword anyway at Liverpool, in that time when you were having these problems, because the first season, as Stevie said, things run a little bit like clockwork. And he did a great job, don't get me wrong. But this season, when the proverbial was hitting the fan, I bet if you were to ask him now, I bet he wished he'd made some bigger, bolder decisions. Because the Salah thing, he tickled him with a feather duster, didn't he? He only dropped him a couple of times. I bet he wishes now he didn't have to force Isak into the team, which he did when Ekitike was playing well. He probably wishes he'd dropped Salah earlier. But he never had the biggest squad. But I bet if you said to him now, could you have done some things differently in this season where you got sacked? He would probably say, I wished I'd upset a few more of the big egos a little bit earlier and gave myself a chance. Because he didn't, and he fell on his sword anyway. So when Iraola goes in there, he cannot be frightened. Obviously, there's no Salah. Van Dijk is still there. Didn't have a very good season. As the captain. So, you know, is he going to be back to his best with another partner? Or is he going to be the Van Dijk that was throwing his arms up every 2 minutes? Ask Frank about that. Frank loves it. Throwing his arms up every 2 minutes when somebody makes a mistake. And that mistake might even have been Virgil van Dijk himself. But the arms still come up. So there's a lot of questions about this Liverpool side. However, with this manager going in and with a signing here or there, I wouldn't write them off. But you have to look at what Arsenal have done to get over the line. And that is not just buy good players, but I think Don mentioned it, is beef up the squad. You're not going to win the Premier League if you turn around to your bench and there's a bunch of kids. It's not going to happen. Might have done when we were all playing, when there was 2 subs. But not now, it's not, because every club, every team can go to the bench and pick 5 or 8 players to go on as subs. Out of they've got a selection. Iraola needs to have that selection choice if Liverpool are going to be back next season amongst the top 2 or 3 in the Premier League.
What's your reaction to that, Don? I suppose one thing we've seen from him is that he has made a lot of players better and taken them to a new level.
100%, and Craig mentioned the midfield, so why can't they get back to that level? Again, when you look at Iraola and the job that he's going to do, he definitely improves players, and he can definitely lean on the data and the analysis. When you look at some of the Bournemouth players, the signings that were made, I mean, James Hill, who played a lot of games as centre-back, he cost £1 million from non-league football. You know, Krupi cost, I think, 14 or 20 million pound, who had a great season. Truefair, the left-back, he was about 20 million euros as well. So they can rely on that data team. I know it's Liverpool. I know they might be shopping in a different market, but still, you can lean on Michael Edwards, Richard Hughes, trying to look at what Iraola's ideas are. And then you look at the Bournemouth team, and you look at the Liverpool team that's there present, and you go, you wouldn't swap many, but you'd swap the work rate, and you'd swap the manager to try and make all those players that Craig and Stevie and Frank have mentioned to be better, because they are better. Gravenberch proved it in the season that they won the league. Outstanding midfield player, one of the best number 6s in the Premier League. So he can get back to that level. Of course he can. McAllister's been run into the ground now, and he's got a World Cup coming up, so he might be the difficult one, but he's played an awful lot of football. But, you know, Iraola, I think, is going to come in. He's going to work them hard. He's definitely going to need signings, Kay. I've been on here before, and it's difficult to try and remember them all, but when you look at the bench that Slot had when they won the league, and the bench was Kelleher, it was Kwanzaa, it was Joe Gomez, it was Conor Bradley, it was Endo in midfield, it was Darwin Nunez, it was Jota, it was Gakpo at times, and there's probably 3 or 4 that have Curtis Jones, another one. So to Craig's point, Arne Slot this season is churning out the same players every 3 days when he was in a Champions League, they must be absolutely shattered. And he looks around and he sees Ingamoa and a bunch of kids and Chiesa, who's half fit. So I do think Slot has been left very short. But the appointment of Iraola, I honestly think, on top of what all the lads have said, you know, he's going to make the players so much better.
Well, the other one is, I forgot to mention, we were talking about, just briefly, we were talking about Kerkez. That has to be great news for him that Iraola probably is going to come in.
Yep.
Who just knows the young lad, and he is still a relatively young lad. He knows his game inside out. And he'll have been watching him last season, he'll been watching his struggles. And I think when you've played for a manager and played, unless he's called Iraola a muppet when he's walked out the door, which some of us may have done. As long as he hasn't fallen out with the Bournemouth manager as he walked out the door to Liverpool, which I'm sure he hasn't done, then this is great news for him.
Yeah.
You know, somebody to build your confidence up, knows your game, and can really help you. Because it did feel last year as if he was on a bit of an island.
So
Milos Kerkez.
let me get to the reports on Iraola's contract. It's that he will sign a 2-year contract, which is what we have seen with this manager and previous clubs. Are you okay with that 2 years?
Absolutely, yeah. Listen, I don't see how either party would have a problem with that. You know, Iraola's getting the chance to manage one of the biggest and best teams in the world. And Liverpool are getting an opportunity with this 2-year contract that if things don't work out, because at the end of the day, we know there are certain things that Iraola doesn't have in his locker. You know, he's not used to picking for 4 different competitions in one season. You know, at Bournemouth, he's been all about staying in the Premier League and then try to build on that. That's a different ball game when you have to compete for the Champions League, the Premier League. You want to win the FA Cup, all of these things. So there are certain things that we know Iraola doesn't have experience of. And that's why I think it suits both parties. A 2-year deal means that if it doesn't go for Iraola, Liverpool's not lumbered with some 8-year contract like Chelsea. And for Iraola, if he does his job properly, he's going to get another contract anyway. But he still gets 2 years to manage one of the biggest clubs in the world. I think it's a win for everybody.
Well, I get to I'm not getting to the World Cup because I'll leave that sort of disappointment that's going to come your way in the next few weeks. But what... And this maybe is a discussion for another day, but I'm going to throw it in here now anyway. What the hell's happened to English coaches? Why is it... Where are we with Britain and the UK?
Well, they don't get a chance, do they?
Coming up on tomorrow's show.
But where are
what's
we?
happened with English coaches?
Young Spanish, young Italian coaches, German, French.
Everything but.
At Sunderland. You get Iraola coming in and doing wonders. You get Unai Emery doing, you know...
Michael Carrick?
Well, to be fair, Eddie Howe didn't have a great season. Michael Carrick was shoehorned
Fallen in that. He's fallen in.
I need it for the segue.
No, it's a slightly different one.
Oh,
but
right.
you know, it is a... That's a different... That's maybe a post-World Cup discussion when we've got absolutely sod all else to talk about. And this World Cup, once the 354 million games are done, we can talk about this. But that is particularly these Spanish coaches, these young Spanish coaches coming in and doing great work. We're seeing it even in La Liga with Inigo Perez at Rayo Vallecano, and there are others. Bordalas has done a great job, but that's a different scenario.
We got La Liga next year, eh?
Yeah.
I thought so. It sounded like...
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. We are every day here.
Have I missed anybody yet?
Not yet, though.
Don't worry, that's all that's coming up.
FA Cup.